Good morning. Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone here speak Czech? Okay, so not David. I'll do this talk in English for him, but for the rest of you, I've got you. Don't worry. Dobré ráno. My name is Brian Exelbierd. I was asked to introduce myself. What can I say? I've lived in Brno for about 13 years. I enjoy spreadsheets, beer, and coffee, not in that order. I happen to work for Microsoft these days in upstream Linux. For those of you who've heard me give a talk like this before, you'll know that I don't tend to use slides for them. This talk doesn't really have any visuals to it, so you can look at me or you can study the schedule for where you'll go after this. But I want to start by telling you how I wound up here on this stage at this conference. And it starts last month, actually, at the OpenSSL conference in Prague. I ran into Roman in the hallway, and he stopped me, and he said, hey, what do you know about OpenAlt? And I was like, oh, the Czech Tech Conference. He goes, yeah, the organizers are looking for somebody to give a talk. They want something a little bit about community. They want to set some staging for the conference. Would you be interested? Your name's come up. And I said, it's interesting. I mean, I have done work in this space, but I'll do it only under two conditions. One, you have to tell me what you actually want to accomplish with this talk. And two, it has to actually be useful to the conference or to the community. I'm not just looking for an opportunity to stand on a stage. And so, last week sometime, we met in a coffee shop and we confirmed everything and got it all worked out. And here I am. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because it didn't take place in any kind of a formal setting. It happened between talks at a conference in a completely informal manner, in that interstitial space, that hallway track. And those of us who go to conferences, we don't say this out loud enough, but those hallway track conversations can oftentimes be the most important part of the conference for us. They can be more important than the talks. And this isn't to denigrate speakers, but it's to remind speakers that our job as speakers is to create those conversations. And the job of everyone at this conference is to have those conversations. And when I think about that, I think about a campfire. Because we gather around a campfire to share our stories, to share our news, to sing songs, to celebrate our wins, and to support each other. And a campfire is an interesting kind of a fire. It's not like a bonfire. A campfire is community tended. As we sit around, we'll all watch the fire and we'll move the logs around when they fall or need to be repositioned. We'll add more wood when it's time to do that to keep the fire going. And in short, we crowdsource a safe fire experience for everyone. OpenAlt is like that. It's a community-built conference. We, as a community, have provided everything that is making this weekend happen, from the organization, to the talks, to the culture, to the camaraderie, and most importantly, those conversations. So welcome to OpenAlt 2025, and welcome to the campfire. Now, the organizers did provide me a little bit of guidance on what they wanted out of this talk, but they did not give me any specific path to get there. So I sat down with some friends and decided to read this year's schedule. And my friends, Google Translate, ChatGPT, and I found that this schedule is full of amazing talks. And the thing that I really came away with on the first read was how much this is a Czech-led, but not Czech-exclusive conference. And I didn't know that. And it makes me feel bad that for 13 years I haven't chosen to attend. I plan to fix that. You may even see me talk about something more technical next year. Now, there are some themes in what I read that really resonated with me, and I think make it important that this is a Czech-led event. And I want to talk about a few of those. I promise to not read you a list of talks. That would be a horrible talk for me to give, and I'm not going to put you through that. The first of these themes, though, is around the open source activity in this country. There's a bunch of talks on that. There's talks on EU regulations, and there's talks on the Czech OSPO, or Open Source Program Office. And these talks, in my opinion, are the modern continuation of what some of you have explained to me about so-calls and their civic function and foundation in this country. These are talks that are going to cause us to have conversations about digital sovereignty, freedom of choice, and collaboration. And these are conversations that we need to have because those are important aspects of a strong and vibrant community. I hope you'll go and learn more about these things. There are also a bunch of talks on education. And education in particular is something that only a Czech-led conference can do well in this country. I have a daughter, she's 6. She started public school this year. She speaks way better Czech than her dad, don't worry. And she is going to benefit from all of the conference conversations that are going to happen around improving education. Just like all the babičky and školáci will in the whole country, the grandmas and the school kids. Without these conversations, we won't be able to help them make informed decisions. We won't be able to help them make good choices. We won't be able to help them understand their options and their freedom. These are important conversations, and I thank you for that work because it will benefit my daughter. I also want to mention the maker community who is present. They seem to be the modern-day continuation of Czech inventiveness, seemed to be the right term. I learned very quickly living here that that is embedded in the DNA. And some of it's been explained to me is it was a function of daily life in earlier times. If you weren't inventive, you had problems. But nowadays, it is part and parcel. It is practice. It is hobby. And I look at some of the things that I've seen people do, and honestly, I think it's more of an homage to Zimmerman in a lot of cases. I've seen people do really crazy things, like somebody who swore that they bought a train ticket for every possible train and then canceled them only if they weren't next to Hlavní nádraží when the train was leaving. That's amazing. I also want to touch on a little bit about AI because I think I'm now required to say AI a few times in a talk, but more importantly, self-hosting. In my house, I have a problem right now. I have a bunch of Echo Dots. And she who should not be named does not speak Czech. This means that I cannot indoctrinate my child with Josem Zbažin whenever I wish, because she does not understand the song title. So I've been running some experiments with Home Assistant Voice, trying to figure out, can I find a model that will let me ask for that song to be played, a mix of Czech and English? I have failed. I've also failed at English and Polish, so it's not just you. The point here is, this is hard, and there's a lot of talks going on around this, and it's, again, a space where Czech-led open source is going to solve a real problem. By the way, if you actually solve that problem, find me. I will buy you a beer. I need this. So, where I'm going with this overall is that I've walked away from the conference schedule, and I've walked away from my reading and understood the power of this conference as Czech-led and with Czech open source. And I'd go a little further and say, Czech open source can be a model for the world. And I don't say that lightly. I say it because we have the talent and we have the motivation. And we are privileged to be in a country that is large enough where we can solve problems at scale, but small enough that we can actually run experiments and iterate. And this lets us create a series of proven solutions that others can examine, adopt, and adapt. And you can see that in one of the sponsors here, CZNet. They made not DNS. It has had global impact. I read a long and humorous story about Fastmail's adoption of the DNS product, or project, excuse me, for their global infrastructure. This is Czech open source solving a global problem at global scale. So that's the fire that we've built for ourselves here this weekend. And now that we're all around that fire, spikačky in hand, we're going to do some grilling. Let's talk a little about us. So we are a community of people who solve problems, who improve things. And when you put us in a small space and we have conversations, things get interesting. And I'm reminded of 2 years ago, I was at my daughter's friend's birthday party. And all the dads are standing around the fire, and we're grilling our spakachki for our kids. And this man who I had not talked to the whole time, he'd only spoken Czech the whole party, I didn't interrupt him, he walks up, gets a sausage, he starts grilling. Very quickly, he begins dominating the conversation. And he is pointing, and he is gesticulating, and he is talking in very exacting words, and he is using vocabulary I have no idea what this man is saying. Despite my limited vocabulary, I'm usually pretty good at following the broad strokes of a Czech conversation, especially when I have context. I know we're dads, I know we're at a party, I know we're holding sausages. Like, what more do I need to know? But I don't have any idea what this man is on about. Eventually, his sausage is done, and he wanders off to give it to his kid. And I look to the other fathers, and I'm like, what was he talking about? What is going on? And they just start laughing, and they go, so, he was criticizing the way this man has cut his sausage. That is a fancy new cut, and it is not the traditional alternating pluses. It is unnecessary, it is unneeded, and it is fancy. And I thought that was hilarious. And I also thought I would forget this story, and I would certainly not be here years later telling it. But it didn't leave my mind. And I couldn't figure out why for a while, but a few weeks later it came to me. This was not a story about an odd man and his obsession with sausage cuts. This was actually a story about norms policing. And it was a story about norms policing in the face of innovation. And what really struck me was, I've had this conversation before in open source, just not about sausages. And that's what happens when you bring people together. You sometimes get odd conversations. I want to tell a slightly different story about bringing communities together. This one takes place, coincidentally, also in Prague in 2017, around another campfire, this one being Open Source Summit. At the time, I had a problem stuck in my head. I had it there for about a year. I was working for Red Hat at the time. I was deep in Fedora Linux. And I worked on a team where I had a colleague who was deep in CentOS Linux. And it bothered me that these two communities did not seem to cooperate. We just couldn't seem to get them together. And what was worse for me was I couldn't even find synergy in my work with my colleague. And we're both professionals who do this for a living. You would think we could figure it out. So at that open source summit, I grabbed the Fedora leader, the Fedora project leader, and I grabbed the CentOS project lead, and we sat in a dark corner of the conference center. I can still see the kind of disgusting couches that were there. And I shared my fever dream, my shower delusion of how I was going to fix this problem and bring these communities together. We were going to build the ultimate build system and the ultimate source management system. And from this greatness, we would derive all of the outputs of both of these distributions. These distributions would now be side by side, they'd be sisters, siblings, and they would obviously have to cooperate and cross-pollinate. Mission accomplished. What shocked me a little bit was they both liked the idea. And we actually got very energized. I drew some diagrams, piece of cardboard later. We left this meeting ready to do it. Now, if any of you work in Fedora or CentOS, you'll know we failed. And it is true, we failed. And the reason that we failed isn't because we didn't try. It was because this was really too complex of a solution. It was too hard. And most importantly, we couldn't figure out how to get a foothold into the problem. But we did try. And something magical happened. In the act of trying this, in the act of socializing this, in the act of discussing this, organically, we began to see presentations about one operating system at the other operating systems conference. It started with a talk about Fedora here at a CentOS event, or a talk about CentOS at a Fedora event. But it grew. And now if you go into that ecosystem, their next big conference will be CentOS Connect at FOSDEM, you're going to find tracks of Fedora talks next to tracks of CentOS talks. And it's grown. There's OKD talks, there's CoreOS talks, There's more and more projects coming around that fire to have that conversation. And my big takeaway was that if we can create these spaces for shared conversations, then we can build collaboration and trust. So I want to go back to my favorite sausage guy. He's not wrong for wanting traditional cuts. And the other dad isn't wrong for wanting to make an octopus or whatever it was he was doing. They just have different beliefs about how things should be. Different beliefs about the way that things should be done. And as I said, that happens here in open source. The axis that I see it most commonly on is that we have projects that are deeply principled. They have a very specific set of beliefs, and they are not going to compromise on that. On the other side of the axis, we have some projects that are very pragmatic. They have a specific solution they're trying to solve, and their principles give them wiggle room to make decisions to solve that problem. But no matter which end of this we're talking about, no matter which part of that spectrum we personally fall on, we need everybody else. To pick the two extremes, if you will, we need both sides of this. So I'm going to use a small example, Debian and Ubuntu. Debian is a deeply principled project. They value freedom. They have a specific way they want things done. There are specific things that they will do and specific things that they will not do. But Debian needs Ubuntu and Ubuntu needs Debian. It's easier to look at it from the pragmatic Ubuntu side. Ubuntu, in this case, their goal is users. They have a moral code that is more in line with the four freedoms or the OSI definition. It's slightly looser, slightly broader. And so they're willing to make decisions that Debian won't or chooses not to around things like firmware blobs or package sets and defaults. But Ubuntu needs Debian because Debian is the core of the quality of the Ubuntu distribution. On the other side of this, I said Debian needs Ubuntu. Well, why? Well, they need Ubuntu because Ubuntu is going to draw people into the ecosystem. Some of those people will become Debian users. Some of them will contribute. But critically, a lot of their code is going to get run and tested and beat up over here. And those patches will flow back and make Debian better. So I've talked a bit about our campfire. I've talked a bit about what can happen if we share that fire regularly. I have a couple of things I want to ask of you. The first is, I want you to think about your own projects. And I want you to think about who you should go talk to right now about how your projects grill and cut your spakachki, and find somebody who cuts them differently and have that conversation. As a part of that, I want you to use that as an excuse to remember what these campfires are for. And if you don't have a project in mind, or if your project chooses to not grill, which is fine, we'll allow that. I want you to do this differently. I want you to celebrate wins. Every time this weekend that you hear somebody announce a win that they've had, I want you to applaud them. I want you to congratulate them. I want you to find them. The idea here is that bugs don't fix themselves, people fix bugs. Those people deserve a campfire moment. We now live in this weird post-COVID world where we're all remote first and travel budgets have now been cut, a bunch of conferences disappeared. We don't have these in-person places to celebrate wins. A lot of us live in a system now where our win is relegated to the retrospective. And we go, great, you made the next release, retrospective's next week, planning's the week after that. Like, that's not a celebration, that's just a, hey, we did something. So take this time to celebrate. And don't think a win has to be special. The 97th release of a project was as hard to get out as the first. This is the 20th year of OpenAlt. This conference was as hard to get out as the very first Linux alt or the very first Open Mobility. So if you find our organizers, one is here, celebrate with them. Let them know that you really appreciate this win and you want to be there with them. The second thing that I want you to do after this conference, or I should say during this conference, excuse me, is I want you to think about how to bring your project and your ideas here. Next year's talks are built from this year's sparks. If you start having those conversations now, you will already have that CFP submission ready when it opens. And more importantly, maybe that's too big. Maybe that's too hard. Maybe you're like, I don't know, it's 45 minutes. I don't know if it's going to be important. Will it change things? Well, lucky for you, OpenAlt has these monthly meetings. Go to the next monthly meeting. Meeting number 211, excuse me, 211 was in September. That's 211 campfires that you may have missed. Don't miss number 212. Find out if meeting 212 has an agenda yet. If not, that is a bug you can fix. You can set up the next campfire. And at that campfire, we can make my cardiologist angry. I mean, grill Spikotski. So, take these things away, and remember that this conference, this campfire, it is here for you. And on a broader level, remember, Czech Open Source has everything that it needs to continue to be great. We have the people, we have the motivation, we have the opportunity, and we are well positioned. Thank you very much.